Welcome to this online presentation of EPA's recently proposed carbon pollution guidelines for power plants. This overview presentation is designed to explain why the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency is working to reduce carbon pollution, the Clean Air Act authorities EPA is using for existing power plants, highlights of the proposed guidelines, how the public can comment, and next steps in developing the final guidelines. We look forward to hearing your comments as we move forward to regulate carbon pollution from existing power plants. First, this proposed rule represents an incremental step in fulfilling the President's Climate Action Plan. President Obama directed EPA to set flexible carbon pollution standards, regulations, or guidelines as appropriate for power plants under Section 111 of the Clean Air Act. Last fall, EPA took the first step to reduce carbon pollution from power plants, proposing emission standards for those plants not yet built. EPA proposed these standards under Section 111B of the Clean Air Act. More recently, EPA took action by proposing ways states can develop plans to reduce carbon pollution from existing sources. EPA proposed these guidelines under Section 111D of the Clean Air Act. The next section of this presentation will focus on the reasons it is so important for the United States to take action to reduce carbon pollution. What about carbon pollution is so harmful, and why should EPA commit to reduce it? The harm is global climate change. It is real, and it is happening now. The evidence is clear that carbon dioxide, or CO2, in the atmosphere is building up at an unprecedented rate and the Earth is warming. And over the last 50 years, human activities have been the primary cause of global warming. Global temperatures have risen by more than 1.5 degrees Fahrenheit over the past 100 years. In fact, 9 of the 10 warmest years on record have occurred since 2000. This warming is causing significant changes to the environment and society now, changes that are expected to become more harmful, more disruptive as the planet continues to warm. Of the 4 greenhouse gases, carbon dioxide, or CO2, is emitted primarily from burning fossil fuels, including oil, natural gas, and coal. CO2 accounted for 82% of the total U.S. greenhouse gas emissions in 2012. Almost 1/3 of all greenhouse gas pollution in the United States comes from the generation of electricity by power plants. You hear people ask, what is a couple of degrees here or there? Changes of a few degrees on average at the global scale mean substantial changes in climate and cascading effects that result in real harm to people and places around the globe. This harm includes changes in when, where, and how hard rain falls, increasing sea levels, which can worsen storm surges, disruptions to our agricultural systems and production, worsening droughts and wildfires, and negative impacts on human health. Extreme weather comes at a cost, and the changes we're making to the climate can increase the frequency and severity of some of these extremes. Climate and weather disasters in the United States in 2012 alone cost the American economy more than $100 billion. These are just a few examples of the world we could expect to experience as carbon pollution increases and climate change worsens. Let's examine several of these effects more closely. First, the impact of one of our most precious resources, water. Warmer temperatures will increase evaporation, causing some areas to be drier and subjecting other areas to excessive rainfall. The water cycle intensifying with more rain falling in the form of intense downpours and more frequently, especially over recent decades. In addition, drinking water is in danger in coastal and island communities from rising sea level and changing patterns of precipitation. Next, let's examine how carbon pollution impacts human health. We've shown how carbon pollution, if unchecked, will lead to long-lasting changes in our climate. These changes threaten health and welfare for current and future generations. Public health risks include More frequent and intense heat waves and drought can lead to more heat-related illnesses and deaths. Worsening smog, also called ground-level ozone pollution, can lead to more asthma attacks and other respiratory diseases. Increasing the intensity of extreme events like hurricanes, extreme precipitation, and flooding can lead to water quality issues, mental health concerns, and damages to health service infrastructure. Increasing the geographic range of insects can spread disease, such as dengue fever, Lyme disease, and West Nile virus. The most vulnerable include children, older adults, people with heart or lung disease, and people living in poverty. They may be at most risk from the health impacts of climate change. As we understand the risks and consequences of uncontrolled carbon pollution, we understand we must act. EPA is working to address the largest source of greenhouse gas emissions in the United States, emissions from the electricity generation and use, which is responsible for 32% of all greenhouse gas emissions. This proposal takes action to address the range of potential reductions available in the electricity sector. This proposal is just one aspect of the President's Climate Change Action Plan. It is important to understand that plan and how we are acting under a broader umbrella of actions across the federal government. The President's plan pulls together agencies across the federal government to work together with other key partners: states, cities, industry, consumers, and the international community to address the challenge of climate change. EPA is working on a number of fronts to deal with climate change. In addition to reducing emissions from power plants, EPA's contribution to the President's plan also encompasses work on building a 21st century transportation sector, cutting energy waste in homes, businesses, and factories, and reducing methane and hydrofluorocarbons, and leading international efforts to encourage those in the international community to do their part to address climate change. EPA is also working on adaptation measures to help prepare the United States for the impacts of climate change.